So just before we get started here today, I'd like to dedicate this video to Brian Wilson, who of course sadly passed away earlier this year. Hello, welcome back to another video where today we're going to be talking about what Rolling Stone magazine called the second greatest album of all time on their most recent list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Released on May 16th of 1966, Pet Sounds was a game changer of an album, not just for the Beach Boys but for the wider music industry, but we'll touch on all that shortly. So start with here, let's show you this one and only copy of the album that I own. So this is the front cover. As you can see, this is a stereo copy. I do wish I owned a mono copy. I could buy one, I probably will buy a mono one at some point, because I have become one of them people who believes if you own an album from the 60s, you should really own it in mono. But I bought this when I first started buying records many years ago and I didn't know better. But anyway, this is a repressing. I don't know when it's from. I'm going to assume it's from around the 50th anniversary, so I'm going to guess it's around 2016 pressing this. But yeah, as I say, that's the front cover, and I'm not the first to say this, but this is not a great cover. It does let the album down. I don't like the cover, I don't like the name of the album. It doesn't really suit the music that well. It's very 60s, or mid-60s of its era. Obviously, when the Beatles would come along next with Sgt. Pepper, it would kind of change the game for album covers. So yeah, it's a shame it has a pretty bad cover, this one, but it's very of its time. But nevertheless, the album itself is great, just not a great cover. So this is the back cover, folks. As you can see, it's predominantly pictures of the band on their 1966 Japanese tour, which Brian wasn't on, so they've also included some pictures of Brian at home. But again, this back cover doesn't really have anything to do with the album itself. It kind of clashes with the music. It's just got nothing in common. So yeah, the artwork for this album ain't great on the front or on the back. And I'll quickly show you my copy of the album itself. It's just in this white sleeve. Nothing's fancy, just on black vinyl. So there you go, if you can see that hopefully on the capital label there, and that's side 2. Like I say, this is a stereo pressing. I will pick up a mono copy at some point, because this album, if you are going to listen to it, it does sound better in mono. Yeah, better than stereo, although Brian was at least involved in the stereo mixing of this album, but the mono one was the one where he really put his time and effort into. So anyway, that is Pet Sounds, what's included in the album itself, and we'll now go to me over there telling you the album background. So over to me. Go on, Ollie, tell him. Now naturally, as you can probably expect, there is a lot to unpack with the background of this album, and to be honest, if I was to tell you most of the stuff that happened with this album, I'd be here probably for half an hour at least telling you the album background, and I don't really want to do that, to be honest, because there's nothing I can say here that hasn't already been said, and probably said a lot better elsewhere. So if you do want to know the full in-depth story of this album, then go and watch another video somewhere on the internet. There's plenty of documentaries being made over the last 60 years, there's plenty of books being written if you'd rather read about it. So yeah, that'd be the best place to go. But we will do like a very brief overview of this album, and I mean very brief, because I don't want to spend forever talking about the background, because I'll probably spend quite a bit today on the track by track review, and you'll probably get quite a bit of the background as well in the track by track review, if that makes sense. So let's dive in now to a very brief background of Pet Sounds. So in January 1965, Brian Wilson would have a nervous breakdown, and he would then subsequently withdraw from all future tours with the Beach Boys. He would just stay in the studio focusing on his songwriting and his production. So that would be now what Brian would do. The rest of the Beach Boys would carry on going on tour. Brian was replaced on the road, I think originally by Glenn Campbell, but then subsequently by Bruce Johnson, who was with the Beach Boys pretty much to the end. And they ended in the 90s. They don't go on. I know they technically still exist, but they don't really. But yeah, Bruce joined at this point to replace Brian, while Brian stayed in the studio. So with Brian now staying in the studio more, the band would start to move away from their surfing songs that defined their early careers, and they would move into more sophisticated productions and themes. Now at some point in 1965, Brian met Tony Asher, a lyricist and an advertising jingle writer, and by December 1965, Brian had invited Tony to be his writing partner for the next Beach Boys album. Now it was also during this period that Brian would hear Rubber Soul by the Beatles for the first time, and when Brian heard this album, he was blown away by it. He was convinced that was the greatest album ever recorded, and he was right that it was up until that point. But he felt, as a composer himself, as a songwriter, he needed to outdo this. So he would enter into a competition with Lennon and McCartney to try and outdo them. So that was kind of a big catalyst for Pet Sounds to outdo Rubber Soul. The sessions for Pet Sounds primarily took place between January 18th and April 13th of 1966. Brian was hugely influenced by Phil Spector's Wall of Sound production, so for these sessions he would employ Spector's session musicians to record most of the backing tracks. So the reason Brian was using these session musicians was the songs he was writing was far too complex for the abilities of what the Beach Boys themselves were able to play. Plus the rest of the band throughout this period were predominantly on the road on tour, so they weren't about, so Brian needed someone to record these backing tracks. So when the other Beach Boys came back, they would find that the backing tracks had already been recorded, which if I was in a band and one of my members was staying at home and in the studio, and then I came back to hear that basically most of my job they'd done for me, I wouldn't be very happy, and I think this did cause a bit of tension in amongst the ranks of the Beach Boys. So when they did get back from touring, the rest of the Beach Boys would come in the studio to record their vocals and listen to what Brian had been creating. Reactions were apparently mixed amongst the band, but nevertheless they would successfully record all their vocals, and the album was eventually completed by April of 1966. So when Capitol Records first heard this album, they didn't really get it. They felt that Brian, for some bizarre reason, was trying to destroy the Beach Boys and everything they built themselves up to become, and Brian was kind of trying to get one up on his father by creating music like this that was weird and out there. So they therefore put in what many believe was a half-arsed, half-hearted marketing campaign for this album, and therefore when this album came out on May 16th of 1966 in the States, it would be the Beach Boys' least successfully commercial album, if that makes sense, least commercially successful album, that's what I meant to say. Up until this point, the sales were pretty low by Beach Boy standards compared to their early albums, and Brian and the rest of the band felt that this was largely because Capitol Records were not interested in it. And to further prove that, just 2 months after this album came out, Capitol would go and release an album, I think it was called The Best of the Beach Boys, which was their first compilation album, and because that got put out, it again kind of affected the sales of this album, so Pet Sounds peaked at number 10 in the US, which was pretty low by Beach Boys standards at that point. So Pet Sounds had kind of been a flop in the US initially, but over here in the UK it was a completely different story. Now, the Beach Boys had never really been that successful over here in Britain up until this point. Obviously, I wasn't there at the time, so this is my interpretation of what had happened. But basically, if they came over here, they were sort of seen as a novelty act because with their surfing songs, because surfing songs work fine in California and places like that. But if you come over here and go on tour and play a gig in Birmingham, for example, your surfing songs aren't really going to go down the same as what they would in California. So they hadn't ever really had much success over here, but with Pet Sounds things would start to change because EMI would release Sloop John B as a single, and that single would reach number 2, which was much more successful than they'd had with it in the US. I can't remember where the single Sloop John B got in the US, but it wasn't as high as it did over here. Now, EMI originally had zero intention of releasing Pet Sounds here in the UK because the Beach Boys, they hadn't really had any success, so there was no need to release their albums here if no one was going to buy them. However, with the tide starting to move in favour of the Beach Boys over here, they decided that they would release this album in late November of 1966. However, Bruce Johnson of the Beach Boys would come over here in May of '66 and bring a copy of Pet Sounds, and here he would be introduced to John Lennon, Paul McCartney and Keith Moon, and he would play them this album, and the three of them were blown away, and then it would gradually grow in stature here in the UK. If you want to hear more about that, I did a series called Revolver in Depth earlier this year, where I did actually talk quite a bit about this. It was my episode, I think it was on Here, There and Everywhere, so if I remember I'll link it down below where you can hear much more about this story. But basically it caused this album to become quite big in this country, so EMI were then forced to rush release the album in June of 1966. I think it was June 27th off the top of my head. Anyway, the album would peak at number 2 here in the UK, and it was a completely different story. It was a commercial success. It was their most commercially successful album here, and it was really well received. It was considered a masterpiece. It was a pop masterpiece, a pop classic. All the music press were all over it, the other bands were all over it, and the Beatles heard it, and they felt that they had to now try and outdo this, and they would with Sgt. Pepper. So they got into a little rivalry here with Brian Wilson between Brian and the Beatles. So yeah, creative rivalries fuel great albums, it turns out. But yeah, eventually in the US it would eventually also become very successful there. It would become a classic album there, but initially it wasn't successful there, it was successful here, which is very strange. So that's a very brief overview of this album. Like I say, if you want to hear its full story, please, I do implore you, go and watch a documentary about it, go and read books about it, do whatever you want. Watch the Love and Mercy Brian Wilson biopic, because that kind of covers it all too, and it's also a very good biopic, one of the better ones. Anyway, there you can hear the full story of this album, because there is a hell of a lot to unpack, far too much for me to do here in this short video. I say short, God knows how long this is going to be. I hope it's between 20 and 30 minutes. If it's more than that, I am sorry. Anyway, briefly I'll say what I thought about this album when I first heard it, because when I first heard it, I didn't like it. You know, I grew up knowing this album as one of the greatest albums of all time, And when I first listened to it, I was a bit underwhelmed. I was like, oh, is that it? It had been sort of built up to be something bigger than what I felt it was. When I first heard this, I'd have been about 15, I would say. And probably most 15-year-olds or people younger than that will not understand this album and what it's about. But thankfully, it's grown on me a hell of a lot over the years, and now I absolutely adore this album. It is one of my favourite albums, and I feel as an adult now I can fully understand what these lyrics and these songs are about. But we'll get on to that now more in the track-by-track review. Let's go and do that, eh? So opening track, Wouldn't It Be Nice, is a straight-up classic. You know it, I know it, it's a brilliant song, it's a masterpiece, we all know it. And it's said to be inspired by Diane Rovell, I think is how you pronounce it, of the Honeys, who was Brian's sister-in-law at the time, and apparently he was obsessed with her. He proper fancied her. So yeah, he was writing songs like this about his sister-in-law. Anyway, the lyrics, they're written by Tony Asher mainly, although it's kind of a little bit disputed who did lyrics, who did music, but I think for the most part we'll conclude that Brian did the music, Tony did the lyrics. So what we find with these lyrics here is the idea of, wouldn't it be nice to be older and then not have to worry about finding a girl, because by that point you'd be married and you would then be able to go to sleep each night, holding each other the whole night through, say goodnight to each other every night. You're guaranteed that. It's the ideal of this perfect relationship that we all aspire for. We all want it. I want it. You probably want it if you haven't already got it. So yeah, wouldn't it be nice, girls, eh? Anyway, the music as well on this song is fantastic. The actual arrangement, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a circus, this song, in its production style. Can't remember the instrument's name. Is it like an accordion, I think? An accordion, the, you know, pulley out thing. I think that's kind of what drives this song. I might be wrong on that. I'm going to read it now and then I'll come back to you and confirm if I'm right or not, because I'm a professional. It is an accordion. I'm right. I know what I'm talking about. Hey. But there's not really much to say about this song that hasn't already been said in the past. I know it. You know it. It's a classic. It's one of them songs that everybody knows. It is one of the Beach Boys' most famous songs. It might be the most famous song on the album. I'm not sure if it's not the most famous. I would say it's the second most famous. But yeah, great lyrics, great song. It starts the album off really, really strong. Next up comes the mysterious You Still Believe in Me, which instantly pulls you in with this, like I say, mysterious sounding harpsichord, which is actually played by plucking the piano strings. So what they did was they opened up a grand piano, got in it and started plucking on the piano strings, because why would you do that instead of just play the piano normally, eh? So originally this song actually started life called In My Childhood, but Brian changed his mind on it. He didn't like the lyrics because he'd written them himself. So he asked Tony Asher to rewrite them and they would be rewritten into this song, You Still Believe in Me. So what this song is about is the narrator is basically singing about being in love with this woman who still stands by the fella, despite the fact that he has been unfaithful. He's carried on behind her back. He's not been nice to her basically, and yet she still believes in him. And it's this idea, this song of you still believe in me and you still have faith in me after everything I've done to you, which is very Brian Wilson, this sort of song, I must admit. All the instruments on this song are fantastic, as are the harmonies on the chorus. That still be... I'm not going to sing it because I can't do vocal harmonies like that. But yeah, it's brilliant. One of the things I love about this song as well is the actual song itself, the music sounds quite vulnerable. And I feel like the vulnerability of the music complements Brian's vulnerable lyrics in some ways. Perfectly. It's a masterful song. It's a masterpiece of a song, this one as well. You're going to hear me say that about virtually this whole album, but again, fantastic song, this one. Another fantastic, brilliant song. I love it. Track 3 is the marvellous That's Not Me, and here we have the tale of a young man who is on a search of self-discovery and enlightenment. So basically what we have here is the narrator of the song has left, I assume, the countryside to go to the city in search of fame and fortune, basically. And he gets it, but to him, he's not happy because he doesn't really care what the rest of the world perceive him as. All he cares about is one girl and how she perceives him. You know, he wants to be successful for that one girl. He's not interested in doing it for the rest of the world. And that there is very, very Brian Wilson. That sums him up to a T, that kind of thing, how vulnerable he is. And he just wants to impress that one girl. And I'm kind of a bit like that. Like, I'm not really that bothered what the rest of the world perceives me as, what you, no offence, watching this, think of me. But there is one girl out there somewhere, don't know where she is, but where I will care very much what she thinks about me. Haven't found her yet, still haven't found what I'm looking for. But yeah, when that happens, this song will then kind of fall into place for me, if that makes sense. I don't want to spend this whole video talking about my personal life or anything like that, but yeah. This is a song I relate to a lot and I have a lot of time for this song. I really do like this one. So yes, enough about me, because let's talk about the music of this song, because it's fantastic. It's one of the few tracks on the album where the Wilson brothers are actually all playing instruments. Brian, I think, is playing bass on here. I'm pretty sure Carl's playing guitar. I know Denny's definitely playing the drums. And you wouldn't know that really if I hadn't told you that. I didn't know that until I read this today. I always just assumed it was the session musicians like the rest of the album, but you wouldn't know. I mean, this idea that the Beach Boys weren't up to the standard that was needed to record the backing tracks of this album, this song kind of disproves that. There is still some session musicians involved in this one, but nothing to the scale of the other tracks on the album. Anyway, I'm rambling on here. So this song, That's Not Me, this is a fantastic piece of music. It is one of the highlights of the album, and I really, really like this song. The majestic Don't Talk, open bracket, put your head on my shoulder, close bracket, comes along next. And here we find Brian and Tony exploring this idea of non-verbal communication between lovers. The idea that you can just put your head on your partner's shoulder and they instantly know what you're trying to say. This idea that non-verbal communication is sometimes a better way of saying what you want to say rather than actually looking for the words. Maybe I should do non-verbal communication videos. Not sure how that would work. But anyway, according to Tony Asher, this was one of the harder songs to write because the idea of writing a love song about the idea of not actually talking is actually quite a hard thing to write about. It's a hard thing to talk about as well, evidently. Anyway, it's a slower song, this one, and it's also quite a moody one as well. It's very romantic though, the way Brian sings it, and that's largely what this song's biggest charm is. It's Brian's voice, because the instrumentation on this song is kind of a lot quieter, it's a lot more muted. It's Brian's voice that is the focal point of this song, and he's doing his falsetto voice on the chorus, and it's just beautiful. It is just so hauntingly beautiful, and he's, you know, it's a very romantic voice that Brian has. So yeah, Don't Talk, Put Your Head on My Shoulder is again one of my highlights of the album. I love this song so much, and yeah, it's a fantastic song. It's a masterpiece. So next up on the album is I'm Waiting for the Day, which is one of the few tracks on the album that Tony Asher has played no part in writing. So the lyrics of this song, they're pretty straightforward. The idea is it's this fella who is really into this woman who's had her heart broken by someone, and this fella who's the narrator of the song is trying to comfort this girl, but his intention is he wants to be with this girl. However, this girl, she's too heartbroken and doesn't want another relationship. So the narrator is waiting for the day where she can love again. Makes sense, doesn't it? Now musically, this is one of the faster songs on the album, and that's also its charm. It works well because it gives the melody of this song this restless feel, which perfectly complements the music. The idea of, yeah, I'm helping you here, but I want to be with you, that kind of thing. This restless feeling of wanting to be with this girl. So yeah, the melody perfectly complements that. Now, so far of all the tracks on the album, this one for me is probably the one I enjoyed the least. I wouldn't call it a weak track. It's still a nice song, but it's just not as strong as the 4 tracks that have come so far. So it brings the album down ever so slightly, but on most albums, if this song was on it, it would be the best track on the album. So yeah, it's a great song. It's just not one of my personal favourites on the album. So track 6 is the first of the 2 instrumental tracks that appear on the album. This one is called Let's Go Away a While. Now Brian has spoken about the fact that the music of this song was inspired by Burt Bacharach, who is a fantastic songwriter. If you don't know who Burt Bacharach is, I'm very surprised you're watching this video, but he's one of the greatest writers of all time. Anyway, Brian said that this song was inspired by his style of music, and to be honest, it's not a song I massively care for, this one. It's driven by this very nice vibraphone I think it's called. It's from the xylophone family anyway, of instruments. So it's an instrumental. I don't really care for instrumentals that much. It's a nice enough one, this. It's the better of the 2 instrumentals on the album, but yeah, it's a song I don't care that much for, this one. So closing out side 1 of the album, we have the classic Sloop John B, one of the most famous tracks on the album. So if you don't know, this is one of those traditional songs. It is a cover technically on here, but no one knows who did the original version. It was originally a folk song that Al Jardine really liked, and he brought it to Brian with the idea of it being for the Beach Boys. Al said, this is a really good song, I think we should do it. Brian agreed, and he wrote an arrangement for it. He also rewrote some of the lyrics. I know the line, this is the worst trip I've ever been on. Brian had rewritten that one. Anyway, he arranged it and everything, and then they came to record it for this album. And originally, Al went into the sessions expecting to sing this one, but he was shocked when he got in to see Brian was going to audition the entire band to find out who could sing this one. And unfortunately for Al, he didn't get to sing it because Brian felt his voice didn't suit it. Al was trying to sing it like a folk song, and Brian wanted it to be more like a rock song. So Al wouldn't get to sing it, and it's annoying that, because really he should have sang it, because in subsequent years Al has sang this live a lot and he sings it really, really well. There's a brilliant version of it online from I think it's 2016 when this album was 50, where Al is singing the first and third verse and Brian is singing the second verse, which in my opinion is how it should have gone on this version. So it's a shame he didn't get to sing it. Anyway, it's a fantastic song, this one. Again, there's not much to say about this that hasn't already been said. It's a classic. It's one of those cases where when you say Sloop John B now, for most people they will instantly think of the Beach Boys in this version. Most people probably don't even know it's a cover. Yeah, it's a great song. I love it. It's one of my favourites of the album, and the arrangement's fantastic. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's a classic. It closes out side one perfectly. So we've reached that time, folks. It's time to lift the needle up, take the record off, flip it over, needle back down, and kicking off side two, we find Paul McCartney's favourite song of all time, God Only Knows. You know it, I know it, we all know it. It's the most famous song on this album by far, and it's probably the most famous song the Beach Boys ever did. Now, the big thing with this song is Tony Asher's lyrics. They are beautiful. This is like the perfect love song. It's not really that long a song either. It's only about 3 minutes, if that. And, you know, he says everything that he needs to say in those 3 minutes. Anyway, originally Brian himself was going to sing this song, but apparently he felt, and it's very honourable of him to do this, that he was singing too many of the songs on this album, which, you know, to be fair, most of the tracks on this album is a Brian lead vocal. So he felt for this one he would let his brother Carl sing it, and thank God he did, because Carl Wilson's vocal on here is fantastic. It's probably the highlight of the whole song, to be honest. He's just got such a delicate, beautiful voice. Yeah, great performance from Carl here. He really does put in a good shift here anyway. So there's not really all that much I can say about God Only Knows that hasn't already been said. You know it, I know it. It's an all-time classic. It's one of the best love songs ever made. There's a reason it's Paul McCartney's favourite song. So yeah, probably the best track on the album if we had to be honest. I wouldn't say it's my favourite song on here, but I can understand why a lot of people would argue it is. It is a, guess what, masterpiece. I know there's an answer comes along next, but originally this song was called Let Go of Your Ego. So Brian actually wrote this song with Terry Sashen, I think is how you pronounce it, and it was inspired by one of Brian's first ever acid trips. However, when he brought it into the studio, the man who birthed Kokomo to the world was offended by this song, so he demanded that the lyrics of this song were changed. What a fucking snowflake, eh?
Well, it's a love thing.
So Brian changed it into this song that we have here, and Al Jardine will get to sing the lead vocal, and he does a very nice job. I think it's Al sings the verses, or most of the verses, and Brian sings the chorus. And you know, it's a decent enough song. It's not one of my favourite tracks on the album. I think it was probably better in its original form, which was not offensive, in case you haven't picked that up. Yeah, it's a decent enough tune this, but it's not one of my best favourites on the album. So next up on the album we have Here Today, and the narrator of this song is warning us all to beware of newfound love, because in their view it will instantly, or at some point at least, lead to heartbreak. He sees that newfound love, most relationships just lead to heartbreak. They're all short-lived things. It's a very negative outlook on the world, isn't it? So this was actually the final song recorded for the album, and again, to be honest, I don't really care that much for this one, a bit like the last song. It's not a bad song, it's inoffensive. I don't think that certain fella took offence to this one. Weirdo. But yeah, it's just sort of, again, it's not, I wouldn't call it filler. I don't think there's really any filler on this album, but it's the closest it comes to filler, if that makes sense. Like I say, on most albums, this would be a great song, probably the best track on it, but on this one, it feels like one of the weaker tracks in my opinion. However, next up on the album is not one of the weaker tracks on the album, it's one of the strongest tracks on the albums, the magnificent I Just Wasn't Made for These Times. Now, according to Tony Asher, he sat down and had a conversation with Brian, and the pair of them were saying that neither of them was the most popular kid at school. So lyrically here, we find the narrator telling us that they don't feel like they fit into society, that they're depressed, and they just feel like they weren't made for these times. Now, naturally, when you hear that, you would think, oh, well, you're obviously feeling like you should have been alive maybe 50 years ago. Compared to now, but Brian has actually countered that and said what he actually meant was he feels like he's ahead of his time, like the people around him weren't advanced enough for Brian, that he felt he was about 10-20 years ahead of his peers at the time, which maybe he was, who knows. But it's a very uneasy melody, this song, and that's deliberate. This uneasy melody, this uneasy piano that drives the song is supposed to complement the lyrics, and it does it really well. Now this is a song that I have a lot of time for. I really enjoy this song, and I imagine a lot of people have enjoyed this song over the years, because I imagine we've all felt at some point in our lives that we just weren't made for the times that we are in, that we don't fit in. And yeah, it's a sad song, it's a moody song, it's one of the darker songs on the album, but it is one of the best songs on the album. I absolutely adore this song. It's one of my favourite Brian Wilson songs, period. If you ever want to know why people call Brian Wilson a genius, go and listen to this song. I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, one of the highlights of the album. It is a masterpiece, there is that word again. Title track Pet Sounds comes along next, and this is the second of the 2 instrumental tracks on the album, and for me, and I think for most people I would argue, this is probably the weakest track on the album. Originally, it was written for a James Bond film. I don't know which film it was written for, but it didn't get used, so it got thrown on this album instead. And I don't know why, because I genuinely do not think this album would be any different if it got left off. In fact, if anything, it would be better if it would be left off, because there's 13 tracks on this album, which is an annoying number. If it took this off, it would have been 12 tracks. But yeah, there's really not that much to say about here. It's the weaker of the two instrumentals. It's the weakest track on the album. I don't really care for it at all. And finally here we come to the closing track of the album, the fantastic, the brilliant Caroline No. Now, originally Tony Asher intended for the title and the lyrics of this song to be Carol, I Know. But Brian misheard it as Caroline No, and the pair of them agreed that that was a better lyric, so they stuck with that instead. So lyrically with this song, we find the narrator exploring a former relationship that he had with a girl and trying to work out where it went wrong. And I'm going to tell you a little personal story here, because I have a lot of time for this song. I have a lot of appreciation for this song, because a few years ago now, me and my ex-girlfriend, we split up. And after that, I struggled a bit, but I did relate with this song quite a bit. It meant a lot to me because it like perfectly encapsulated our relationship and kind of what went wrong there. She wasn't called Caroline. But, you know, that open line, where did your long hair go? Where is the girl I used to know? That kind of was relevant for me, because she had long hair and she cut it and then it went really short, and I was like, oh, I like long hair, but never mind. That's a story for another day. But yes, I have a lot of time for this song, and now whenever I listen to this song, I just think of her, unfortunately. It doesn't ruin the song for me, but I can't help but now escape that association because of what went on many years ago now, 2-3 years ago, whatever it is. So yeah, it's a brilliant closing track. The instrumentation on this song is fantastic. It's quite sparse. There's not a lot to it. It's I think Brian plays the grand piano on this song. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's a great song. It's a great closing track. And I'll use the word again. It is a masterpiece. So overall, Pet Sounds is, and I'll use the word, masterpiece. It is one of the greatest albums of all time. There is no denying that. Rolling Stone magazine, like I said at the start of the video, ranked this at number 2 on the 500 greatest albums of all time. Is it the second greatest album of all time? Well, that's debatable, because their most recent list was quite controversial, especially what they put at number 1, which is by far definitely not the best album ever recorded. But anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about this today. It's a fantastic album. If you ever want to understand why Brian Wilson is a genius, listen to this album, because this is the Beach Boys' crowning glory. It's Brian Wilson's crowning glory. Nothing up until this point that they had done had reached these levels, and nothing after this would ever reach this level again. Now, obviously, the Beatles would respond to this with Sgt. Pepper, which, fantastic album, one of the greatest albums of all time, if not the greatest album of all time. For me, it does probably surpass this album, but I'm saying that as a Beatles fan, all right. Yeah, it's a great album this though, nonetheless. So I absolutely adore this album. It means a great deal to me. Brian Wilson, like I say, is a genius, but Tony Asher is equally a genius because the lyrics on this album are fantastic. The best tracks for me are Wouldn't It Be Nice, You Still Believe in Me, That's Not Me, Don't Talk, Sloop John B, God Only Knows, Just Wasn't Made for These Times, Caroline No. That's basically the entire album I've just listed there. So that is how good this album is. So if you're watching this video and you haven't heard Pet Sounds, then seriously, what are you doing? Go and give it a listen, because you are missing out on one of the greatest albums of all time. Not a great cover, but the album itself is fantastic. So that concludes another video, folks. Once again, thank you very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, well, please do like the video and subscribe to my channel. If you're not already subscribed, that would mean a great deal and make me very, very happy. And why wouldn't you want to make a stranger happy, eh? Please do let me know in the comments down below if you like this album. If you do, what's your favourite track? If you don't like the album, I'd be very interested to know why you don't like the album. But bear in mind, Brian Wilson is a genius. So yeah, once again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on a future video. But for now, goodbye.